Welcome to the CSS Part 1 topic video. We're going to learn and understand how CSS and HTML work together. We're going to understand and use 3 different ways to apply CSS rules to an HTML page or to HTML elements, to be more precise. We're going to understand and use CSS syntax, declarations, properties, values. And we're going to understand and use something called selectors. We're going to look at and learn how to use a set of simple selectors. Okay. Our readings are here. Go to these places. These are good. These are our texts. They explain it probably better than me. So give it a try. Okay. Slides are good to remind you that the readings are important. CSS, cascading style sheets. We're going to come back and learn what this cascading part of things means, okay? But in general, this is how we specify the styling of a document, an HTML document. But don't be fooled. It's not just about styling. It also plays a key part in turning HTML pages in the full graphical user interfaces. It is through CSS that we make things such as dialog boxes, confirmation boxes, tab panes, as we call them. Okay, so we call them style sheets. It's really just a file. We call them a style sheet because they consist of an ordered set of rules. We'll learn more about the ordering aspect of this, but it's a set of rules. Okay. A rule consists of 2 pieces. A selector, which determines which elements, and what do I mean by elements? HTML elements, paragraphs, headers, H1s, H2s, sections, figures, images, all the different elements, gazillion elements we have in HTML, figures out which elements we want to apply the rule to. Then it consists of a set of properties, CSS properties. These can be things associated with color, background color, text alignment, etc. There's a gazillion of them. Okay, font types. Okay, so it's going to consist of a selector that determines which things get styled, and a set of properties with values that determine what gets styled. Okay, so let's start with our first example, and we're going to get hands-on. So we're going to take this example, or you can download the example. I think I'll download it. Save link as that's the right one. So I'm going to save that as. I'm going to come back to what do I want to save it to? I think I have a practice. Where's temp? Temp. Okay, we're going to save it in temp. Okay. Take that out of full screen. Let's take a look at my directory structure here. Okay. Let me. Good editors like brackets, I think Atom, Visual Studio Code, have the notion of project directories. So I'm going to take this temp directory because we're going to be working with a couple different files in here. I'm going to open it up as a brackets project. Okay. We only have one file in there now, but it's going to show me all the other files I add to here. Okay. So here, once again, nice syntax highlighting in a good code editor. What do we see? An outline of an HTML document. Okay. We've got HTML. We've got the head. We've got meta. We've got title. Title's required. Oh, link. We said we could put stuff in the head. We're linking information. Okay. A style sheet. Okay, and where is it? I don't think I've downloaded it yet. Let's go back. Okay, so this is the file we're going to style. It consists of what? H1, a heading, level 1, and a paragraph. Okay, let's look at the example. Okay, let's download the styling file. What does it say? Link as CSS. Let's go over to our editor. See, it's showing me everything I drop in that file. I've got, okay, here's my CSS. Okay, I've got a selector, H1. Oh, okay, that's going to tell me we want to apply this rule to all the H1s in the document. We have a property, background color. We have a value for that background color, sky blue. Now you see what just happened there. Yeah, that little blue dot. Good code editors that understand the web, will do things like that for you. They'll help you recognize these color values. Okay. Now here, instead of background color, I'm just using color. We're going to learn a subset of those properties, what they are and how to use them. There's like 300 or so of them out there. Okay. Rendered page. Do we believe that? Let's take a look. How can we check? Let's go to that file. Okay. One thing to note, since this is an in-depth, look at what this says. Link href. Does this have a protocol attached to it? No, it doesn't say HTTP. This is one of those relative links. It's going to look for a file where, with this name, it doesn't have any stuff in front of it. It's going to look right in the same directory and look for a file named first.css. Oh, relative URLs. Double click. Isn't that pretty? Okay. Okay, maybe not so pretty, but shows us basic styling. Okay. So what does the browser do? Okay. The browser, when it loads up, it loads up the HTML. Okay. It converts the HTML in, it has to read it. It parses it. Parses it? Yeah, it's a programming language, so it parses it. It's like a compiler, right? And it's going to take that stuff and turn it into a document object model. Okay, it's going to do the same thing with the CSS. However, after that, it kind of breaks things up. The DOM represents the document in the computer's memory. Okay, it combines the document. Then, after it's got the document in the computer's memory and its document object model, sounds kind of abstract, it combines the document's content with its style. Okay, here's a graphic. Okay, load the HTML. Parse the HTML, create the DOM tree, and at the same time, it will load CSS. Okay, we're going to see there's a number of different ways we can have CSS. It's going to parse the CSS. When it's done with parsing the HTML, parsing the CSS, it's going to apply the styles to the DOM nodes. Okay, what, Professor? Is that true? And why is it so abstract sounding? Let's take a look. Okay. You're going to be doing this so often, it's worthwhile to memorize the hotkeys. Okay. In Firefox, we come over here, we see Web Developer. Okay. We can click over here. Let's see. Toggle tools. I use these tools so often that it's just inherent. Now, a Mac will have might have different key sequence, okay? But on Firefox and Chrome, to bring up the web developer tool is the same. Control-Shift-I, okay? What do I mean? I have it in my keys. I flip back and forth. Okay, I know that's making people busy. So here we see the document, okay? This actually isn't the document. This does not, okay? If you want to truly see the document, you have to come here, okay, and view page source. That's the document, okay? Professor, what's this? This is a representation of the document object model. Notice when I go over our element, like this H1 here, it highlights it up here. This is the document object model live, okay? We said we process the HTML and turn it into a bunch of elements that live in the compute browser's memory, okay? This is the process version. If this doesn't correspond what you intended here, it's because what you got here in your original file has an error in it, okay? This is also means, oh my gosh, look at this. I click on the element here, what's it show me? The style rule. You want to change the color? Change the color. Now, of course, this is a wild set of colors that I can do anything with, etc. So that's changing the color. Green. I don't like that green. Let's change it to a blue or a purple. That's kind of cool looking. Okay. So that picture of taking, that we just saw, of taking the HTML, turning it into this document object model, this live things representing what we see in the browser, the model of it in memory, we get to see it with our developer tools. It's not an abstract thing. Okay. Then we can see how the various styling have gotten applied to it. Here's a style for this. All in our style sheet, we said all H1s are going to have this property, background color, applied to it. Okay, and we set the value. There's a bunch of different ways that you can specify colors. We'll get to that, and you'll never remember them all. Okay, so that's the idea here. Now, what happens if I reload the page? Whoopsies. All my styling's gone. If you find a color that you really like here, you sit there and tweak it out and stuff like that. And you go, I like this color right about here. Copy it. Whoops. Copy rule. Select all. Copy just the value. Okay. And then paste it someplace. Okay. Because what you're doing here is just live manipulation in the browser. Doesn't have anything to do with this. The browser has read the file, visited the site. It's got it in memory. Okay. You modify the CSS or even the HTML in here, got nothing to do with the original site or the original document. Okay. You will lose your edits. Okay. Style editor here can help you a little bit more. Okay. But so that abstract stuff we just looked at, not abstract at all. This is our main program. We are going to learn to program this stuff, okay, and manipulate things that way. Okay, so there are 3 ways to apply CSS to HTML. From best to worst, we'll see that what you use actually depends on your context and why. It's not really best to worst, but it depends on context. We will hardly ever use inline styles until we go to React, because we're going to be mixing our CSS with our JavaScript anyhow. Okay, and we're going to be generating that stuff with code. Okay, but otherwise, we're going to primarily want to use external style sheets. The reason for that is, okay, that's right. This is not a live class. Okay, the reason for that is so we can reuse those styles across multiple web pages. Okay, this is how you get consistent styling across a website. Another thing you can do is use internal style sheets. When do I use that? I use that when I need to modify one of these default page styling for my for these slides. I'll go in and add a little style sheet that applies only to one slide or a few, or a set of slides or something, or a region on a slide. The other place you can use an internal style sheet is when you're crafting HTML emails, okay? Or working with Markdown, except the README file on GitHub. You can't add extra styles to that, okay? So I do use the style elements. So you will use all three of these, okay? So let's try an example with an internal style sheet. Okay, so download this guy. Save link as, blah, 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 blah. Second HTML, save it. Let's go take a look at it in our editor. Here we go, second CSS. And what do we see? We see that we can't just leave these CSS rules, right? They consist of a selector, property, and values. Okay, we can't just leave them lying around. We have to wrap them in a style element. When we're in that style element, CSS syntax applies, including CSS comments, which are different from HTML comments. What's an HTML comment? Now, you forgot an HTML comment? Okay, let's remind ourselves. HTML comments look like this. Oh, I don't know. I forgot. I don't want to deal with it. How do I comment something out? Oh, look at that. I have a hotkey for doing that. Ah, okay. Commenting out things is a critical debugging thing. Good editors, Visual Studio Code and brackets and others, Control/, you can use to toggle comments on and off. But notice, my editor understands, here I'm in HTML, here I'm in CSS. Okay? You don't have to sit there and remember comments. Okay? So, quick trick. Okay, so we see that we have a style sheet and we put it in the head, which is fine. It turns out we can put this anywhere. You can have multiple of these and put them in other places. Good reason to put them in the head is it's right up front, lets people know it's there. Okay, let's take a quick look. I don't think this is going to look too much different. Let's take a look. Yep, we added another paragraph. It's not. Okay. So that is via the style element. Okay, an internal style sheet. Just like you can have lots of external style sheets, you can have lots of internal style sheets. You just put them in the style element. You can put them in the head, you can put them in the body. Up to you. Okay. The third option is what are known as inline styles. We apply a style right to an element, an individual element. Look at the syntax. H1, oh, we use the style attribute. Style equals, oh, we can't use the full CSS syntax. This is a little different, isn't it? Let's download this, make sure it works. Save link as, blah, blah. Third HTML, here we go. Let's go take a look in our browser. Isn't it nice to have an editor that understands directory structures and directory-based project. This is my temp projects. Okay, but let's look at this. Oh, look at that nice syntax highlighted. Quite ugly style. What is this? Funny looking stuff there. We're going to learn about that. But not this lesson. Not this lecture. Let's take a look at it. Oh, it's an emoji thingy. Okay. CSS example, quite ugly styling. Don't use inline styles if you can help it. Okay. I will go further and say, don't use inline styles at all unless you're doing CSS and JavaScript, like when we do React. Okay. No reason to use inline styles for any of the web pages and sites we're making. Okay. We're going to always just use external style sheets or the style elements. Okay. Couple things. After the browser gets the HTML page, okay, it will then make requests for all the external resources listed in the file. Okay, that's going to include the style sheet, images, and other things. But not always. What do you mean by that? To save time, a browser will cache, meaning remember, many of these items and not ask for them again. Why download something that's never changed? Even when you reload the page, because it figures maybe the page content changed, but usually style sheets and JavaScript don't. It's a problem for us, because if we're developing with external style sheets and we change it, we want to make sure it's reloaded. Browsers can have different behaviors. Okay. This information may be old. Okay. Sometimes as soon as you open up the dev tools, they know and assume that when you click reload, they're going to reload everything for you. Okay. So some of these settings you don't need to mess with as much anymore. Okay. But if you notice your CSS is not getting applied, try reloading. Step 2, make sure your dev tools is open. Control-Shift-I. Dev tools is open, okay, and hit the reload button. If it goes further than that, most likely you really just have an error in your CSS, because CSS, as we'll learn, doesn't yell at you about errors. Okay. CSS is a declarative language. Okay. Its syntax is fairly simple to understand. It's a little maddening. Let's take a look. Let's go back. Okay, let's look at this. Our syntax. Look at this. Nice syntax, okay. This looks almost exactly like a JavaScript object that we're going to learn about later. Unfortunately, when you add more properties, use a semicolon, which you don't do in JavaScript objects. So it's just little difference that can drive you a little crazy. Okay, so what do the declarations look like? Okay, they've got a property, a colon, and a value. Okay, it's just a property and the value. Important, if a property is unknown, or if the value is not valid for the given property, okay, so our second CSS example, our first CSS example, background color, let's type in a color. Oops, let me do this. Style editor. Red wine. Wine. That's not a valid color. Did it give me an error? They didn't give me an error here. Okay. Red wine. What if I just go red? Oh, okay. That works. CSS. Okay. Errors quietly. Okay. So if the property is unknown or a value is not valid for a given property, the declaration, this whole declaration, will be skipped, okay, by the browser's CSS engine, okay? That'll drive you crazy, but it was done for a very specific reason, okay? If a browser didn't understand a CSS declaration, instead of giving an error, we're supposed to quietly ignore it, okay? Not do anything about it, okay? That allowed the CSS standards to move forward and the browsers catch up as they would. Okay. So you have, okay. We don't deal with too many compatibility issues, but in this class, but you will see some on some of the more advanced CSS features, some compatibility issues between differences between browsers. Okay, CSS properties. There's more than 300 different ones. Okay. Not all pairs of properties and values are allowed in every situation. It gets complicated because we have to learn to think like designers, graphic designers. It's a language that's halfway between a programming language and a language for graphic design. Okay, which means graphic designers have to learn how to think like a programmer, and programmers have to think a bit like a graphic designer. We're not going to memorize them all. When you need to, you go look up them in references. Okay. MDN's CSS reference is quite good. If you have to, go into the original documents isn't too bad. Okay. So, we can apply many styles or to the same item. So what we do is we have a declaration block. We'll have just like a code block, they'll be in braces. Okay. We'll have declarations, property, value, and between them we'll separate them with a semicolon. Okay. You don't have to have a final semicolon. It's a separator, not a terminator, but it's good practice. It doesn't hurt. If you use certain code beautifiers, they'll actually put it in for you. Okay. So how do we put this whole thing together into a rule? Okay. We will have a rule set or rule. You will have a selector. We're going to learn about some selectors. They can get complicated. Okay. Then you will have a declaration block with values. Okay. So a CSS rule means the selectors plus the declaration block. Okay. There are other CSS statements. We won't be using them very often. Okay. We'll have things like char set. Import is used when you have large CSS collections because it actually, unlike HTML, you can import one CSS into another. Okay. There's something called CSS shorthand. Some properties like font, background, border, padding, and stuff like that have what are called shorthand properties. So you don't have to set up each thing one at a time. Okay, I generally don't use these. You don't have to use these since I don't remember how they work. Okay, except for border. I know border because a lot of times in the old days when we were debugging, you would throw a border around something. So I learned to shorthand for that. We'll see that when we get to the box model. Don't worry about it. If you can use shorthand if you like, but you do not have to. Okay, it's just a shorter way of writing things up. Okay. Now, how do we select things on the page? Okay. The simple selectors that we're going to hit in this lecture are based on either type, the tag, the type of element we're dealing with. You couldn't see me shaking my computer for emphasis, which is silly. Why was I doing that? The type, the class. Remember all those classes that we talked about as that class attribute? Yes. Or the ID attribute. Okay. Those are the ones we're going to go through now. We're going to learn about attribute selectors that can match attributes, okay, and get pretty complicated on attributes that elements may have. We're going to see about pseudo classes, which do things when they're in a certain state, like we can have stuff happen when we hover a mouse over it. So we'll think we're actually programming, but actually it's CSS. But it'll look like things are jumping up and down and doing things for us. And it's just CSS. More selector types, pseudo elements, like we want to put something before the start of a paragraph or something, so we'll have like before and after things. Then one that we will go into more depth on is combinators, at least a certain number of combinators, okay, which we'll use to put together more two or more selectors to make a more specific selector. Okay, so don't sweat that. One last thing, we can put a comma between our selectors and just have the same rule apply to multiple situations. Okay, so you can put multiple selectors attached to the same rule just by separated by commas. Okay, let's get down and try all these things. I haven't taught you what these properties are, but we're going to use some simple example ones so you can see examples of selectors. Okay, so here's some selectors. Okay, and here's the document that they go with. So this is type selectors. This was what we already worked with a little bit. I'm going to just download that so we can see it. Save link as. Okay. Good. Okay. So notice without the greater than less than bracket-ish notation, we see it's just the element tag name. Okay. That's all we need to do to specify. I'm going to make all H1s sans serif fonts with the color dark blue. All the paragraphs I'm going to get a color of bisque. I know. I don't even know what color bisque is. Okay. Anything that's strong, I'm going to give it a background color of coral. Yes, they got very creative with their color naming schemes. Okay, so let's try applying it to something. Here's an H1, here's a paragraph, here's a strong, here's an M. Remember strong, and M's are what kind of content? Inline content, so they don't break up things on a new line. H1s and paragraphs are block content, so they don't get put on the same line. Okay, save this, save link as. Here we go. Go take a look at the, double check our code, type selectors, the CSS, reasonable looking, okay. Our HTML, we're going to apply things. Now, getting a little cluttered up here, so let's get rid of those extra windows, tabs. Type selectors, HTML. Look at that. We're able to give this a particular color. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my inspector. I'm going to go to my body. Look, H1. We can see this is a different style font. Okay, it's something called sans serif. We're going to learn about fonts if you've never dealt with fonts before. Paragraph gets the background color bisque. That's what bisque is. Okay, be careful with colors. For me, you can get as wild as you like. Okay, but if you're trying to be accessible to folks in general, be careful with what colors you use. There's a number of people, there's a whole mess of different types of color blindness out there. Okay, and it also can affect the readability of things. Let's look at the strong tag. Oh, there's the strong tag. That's the color coral. Now you know. Let's look at this emphasis tag. Emphasis gets background color aqua. Okay, nice and easy. Once again, you want to try a different color? Get creative? Go for it. Type selectors. Okay. Now, you may be going, isn't that kind of crude and rude and stuff like that? That's not very much differentiation. Actually, because of HTML5 and semantic HTML, there's a trend with people coming up with nice, these are open source, CSS frameworks that work primarily or exclusively with type selectors. So I'm going to only look at one of these. Okay, let's go over and open this in a new tab. This is something called MVP. What's an MVP? No, not most valuable player. Minimum viable project. Okay, this is what we're always interested in. Startups and projects, our own projects. Listen to this. Minimal style sheet for HTML elements. No class names, no frameworks, just semantic HTML and you're done. Okay, this whole file is styled with their own style sheet. Okay, So that means all this cool styling you're seeing here, all this nice pretty table styling. Okay. Is it mobile friendly? Yes, it is. Okay. No CSS is mobile friendly. Custom CSS. Does it work out of the box? Yeah, you don't need to do anything but use the appropriate HTML elements, tags. Does it use only semantic HTML? Yeah. Do you need class names? No. Perfect for a minimum viable project or product? Yeah. Okay. A decent minimum viable project in no time. These guys will explain to you what they do here and tell you how they use it. Okay. As you saw right at the beginning, they say if you want to get started real quick using it, you just link their style sheet. Okay. And this is coming from Content Delivery Network, Unpackage. Okay. So this is a trend. Okay. If you want to see a huge list of other minimal CSS frameworks, go to this other link. I'm going to open it in a new tab. Okay. I'm just going to point out one of these because GitHub is kind of cool. The styling they do onto our markdown, our process markdown pages. So some people came up with, oh yeah, this looks just like GitHub styling. Okay, this is how they style things. This is a minimal CS library. Okay, now this preview thing actually will show you what lots of different of these minimal minimal frameworks look like. Okay, one that I found that I kind of like is this one, Sakura. Okay, caution. CSS is great, but you can sit there and blow all your time trying to get the perfect CSS or find the perfect CSS framework and such like that. Okay, so in anything, get the homework done first, play with the CSS after you've finished, committed, pushed. Then if you got more time to get your homework done and your other classes, mess with the CSS. The more you mess with it, the more you get used to it. Like I said, it's different for those of us that are programmers. You got to learn about design stuff. In addition, the designers have a challenge, okay? Because it's not a sheet of paper. It's not fixed. We have to do styles and such that apply to laptops, desktops, tablets, and phones of all different shapes and sizes. So it's quite a challenge. Okay, that's why we're going to do some interesting. We're going to work with the new layout methods. Class selectors. How do we choose to style classes, or how do we select based on class? Very, very simple. The class selector consists of putting a dot in front of the class name. Okay. A class name is any value without spaces but within an HTML class attribute. Okay. Can't have spaces. Ooh. But remember, you can have multiple classes. Class selectors, HTML. Okay. Oh, so I guess we don't get this nicely styled separately. So I'm going to take this, copy it, paste it into our body here. Okay. I don't think our style sheet. What am I going to do? Yeah, my cleanup. Okay, nicely cleaned up and indented. So I don't think our previous style sheet that was using tags had anything for ULs. Okay, so here we have a UL. We're going to have first and done, second and done, third and done. What? Oh, this is like a to-do list. First, the first guy is going to get special treatment. Oh, font weight bold. All the elements that are done are going to get a strike through. Ah, so .done class gets, what if it has both? Oh, it's going to get both. So the first one, what was it? First item gets first and done, okay? It's going to get bold and it's going to get a strike through. Let's see if that's true. Oh, wait. We need the CSS. Okay. This CSS is not sitting in a style element, so if I want to bring it in over here, I'm going to need a style element. Ooh, look at that. Okay. Clean it up because we don't like ugly looking stuff. It helps us find errors. Okay, let's come over here. Let's look at it big wise. Big. Let's look at a large version first. Look at that. Nice. So we've got this underlined list. And we've got done attributes. Now, we don't really edit this way, but what would happen if I take off this done attribute? Strike through goes away. What if I add it back in? Remember, I'm just messing with this in the DOM. Okay, this is not, oh, it comes back. Almost all of the, not all, a ton of graphic things we're going to do that look like fancy user interfaces, that create fancy user interfaces. They don't look like it, they are done by adding and removing styles via JavaScript code. That's, I told you, they're all going to get linked up. Okay, we're going to be able to add and remove styles, things like these class names. But we're going to add and remove styles. One of the main ways is by adding and removing class names. Okay, we will hide things. We will show things. We will do all sorts of cool things that way from our JavaScript. That's why all this stuff builds on each other. So these basics are really important. Okay. ID selectors. Remember, we learned about IDs. We learned that if you wanted to navigate to an ID, you used a URL with a hashtag in it. Luckily, the ID selector uses that same type of notion. Use a pound sign, pound sign followed by the ID name. Okay. Remember, any element can have an ID. It's got to be unique within the document. Okay, it's up to you to choose the name for the ID. Let's try this. Okay, let's copy some of this morning. Good morning. Okay, so we have two paragraphs, one polite, one rude. Notice this is ID. Whether I make this lowercase or uppercase, it is sensitive to case, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so we've got IDs for both these items. We just copied it. We're going to put it in. I'm going to put it in right down here. Clean it up a little bit. We got a couple paragraphs. Those blank lines in there, they're ignored. Okay, when the HTML is processed. Okay, so if you want some blank lines in your HTML for easier readability, no problem. Okay, styling. ID selector examples. Now I could put those into a document into a CSS file, or I'm going to just put it into the style we already have going in this page. Style, we got a style element. I'm going to add some more rules to it. Okay, these are ID-based selectors. Clean things up with different. I don't have a hotkey on that I have memorized on Visual Studio Code, but I do have a right click that I just go and tell it to format or whatever. Okay, just keeps your code clear and easy to look at. Okay, you don't have to go through and space things out and stuff like that. Get the tools to do some of the work for you. Okay, so let's reload the page. ID selectors. The polite person says, "Good morning, everyone," and the rude one says, "Don't bug me until I've had my tea." And yes, I'm monologuing because I'm doing this all by myself without seeing anybody's faces. Okay, so we've had tag selectors, class selectors, and ID selectors. Those are the biggies. Okay, we're going to learn about some others and such like that. Okay. but not until later. All right, that should give you a start on CSS. However, we didn't learn any properties. Next video, we're going to learn about styling text, so we'll have actually more stuff to work with because we just use properties without explaining them. All right, talk to you everyone in the next video or at the next lecture.